Question 1. The investigation demonstrates that Officer Miller, while on patrol in Chandler, Arizona, has developed probable cause to believe that a vehicle contains evidence of a felony. There are no immediate indications of danger to the public or the imminent destruction of evidence. What is the most appropriate course of action for Officer Miller to take regarding the search of the vehicle? Option A. Conduct an immediate warrantless search of the vehicle, as probable cause has been established. Option B. Detain the vehicle and its occupants indefinitely until a supervisor can authorize a search without a warrant. Option C. Inform the driver that a search warrant is being sought and request their consent to search the vehicle in the interim. Option D. Proceed to obtain a search warrant from a judicial officer based on the established probable cause before searching the vehicle. Correct answer is D. Proceed to obtain a search warrant from a judicial officer based on the established probable cause before searching the vehicle. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a critical juncture where a police officer in Chandler, Arizona, must balance the immediate need for information with the constitutional rights of an individual. The scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a potential violation of Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches and seizures, requiring the officer to make a rapid, on-the-spot decision with significant legal ramifications. The officer's judgment must be informed by established legal precedent and departmental policy to avoid compromising the integrity of the investigation and potentially violating the suspect's rights. The best professional practice involves securing a warrant based on probable cause before conducting a search of the vehicle. This approach is correct because it aligns directly with the protections afforded by the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which requires warrants to be judicially sanctioned and supported by probable cause. Arizona law, consistent with federal law, mandates this procedure for searches of vehicles when probable cause exists, but no exigent circumstances are present. Obtaining a warrant ensures that an independent judicial officer has reviewed the evidence and determined that a search is justified, thereby safeguarding individual liberties and ensuring the admissibility of any evidence obtained. An incorrect approach would be to search the vehicle immediately without a warrant, relying solely on the officer's belief that probable cause exists. This fails to respect the constitutional requirement for judicial oversight and the protection against unreasonable searches. Such an action could lead to the suppression of any evidence found, rendering it inadmissible in court under the exclusionary rule, and could result in civil liability for the officer and the department. Another incorrect approach would be to coerce consent from the individual to search the vehicle. While consent can waive Fourth Amendment protections, it must be freely and voluntarily given. If consent is obtained through duress, intimidation, or misrepresentation, it is invalid. This approach undermines the principle of voluntary consent and can lead to the same legal consequences as in warrantless search without probable cause. A further incorrect approach would be to delay the investigation indefinitely to avoid any potential legal challenges, thereby allowing potential evidence to be lost or destroyed. While caution is necessary, inaction in the face of probable cause and the potential for evidence degradation can also be detrimental to an investigation and may not be justifiable if reasonable steps could have been taken to preserve evidence. A professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a clear assessment of the presence of probable cause, the existence of any exigent circumstances that would justify a warrantless search, such as imminent destruction of evidence or danger to the public, and the availability of time to obtain a warrant. Officers should be trained to understand the nuances of Fourth Amendment jurisprudence and departmental policies regarding searches and seizures, always prioritizing constitutional protections and due process. When in doubt, consulting with a supervisor or legal advisor is a critical step in ensuring lawful and ethical conduct. Question 2. Assessment of police officer conduct in Chandler, Arizona, when a civilian begins recording a traffic stop from a public sidewalk. Option A. The officer engages the civilian in a debate regarding their right to record the police in public. Option B. The officer calmly informs the civilian that they have the right to record from a public space, but requests they maintain a safe distance to ensure officer and public safety during the stop. Option C. The officer ignores the civilian's recording activity and continues the traffic stop without acknowledging their presence. Option D. The officer immediately orders the civilian to cease recording and move away from the area without providing any justification. Correct answer is B. The officer calmly informs the civilian that they have the right to record from a public space, but requests they maintain a safe distance to ensure officer and public safety during the stop. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between a citizen's right to record police activity and the officer's duty to maintain order and safety. The officer must balance these competing interests without infringing on constitutional rights or compromising their operational effectiveness. Misjudging the situation could lead to legal repercussions, damage to public trust, and potential safety risks. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves acknowledging the citizen's right to record while calmly and professionally asserting the need for a safe distance. This approach prioritizes de-escalation and adherence to established legal precedents regarding citizen recording of police. By clearly communicating the reason for the request, maintaining a safe operational perimeter, and avoiding any confrontational language or actions, the officer upholds both public trust and their duty. This aligns with general principles of community policing and the understanding that while recording is permissible, it should not impede lawful police operations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately ordering the citizen to stop recording and move back without explanation. This fails to acknowledge the citizen's right to record and can be perceived as an attempt to obstruct lawful activity, potentially leading to a complaint or legal challenge. It lacks the de-escalation and communication necessary for effective community relations. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the citizen and continue the interaction as if they are not present. While not overtly confrontational, this can be interpreted as dismissive and may escalate the situation if the citizen feels their presence is being disregarded or that the officer is being uncooperative. It misses an opportunity to manage the situation proactively. A further incorrect approach is to engage in an argument with the citizen about their right to record. This is unprofessional, escalates the situation unnecessarily, and detracts from the officer's primary duty. It demonstrates poor judgment and a lack of control over the interaction. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first assessing the immediate safety and operational needs. They should then communicate clearly and respectfully with the individual, explaining any necessary actions or requests in terms of safety or operational requirements, rather than as prohibitions on lawful activity. If a citizen is recording, the officer should acknowledge this right while ensuring their own safety and the integrity of their investigation or operation. If a request is made, it should be based on specific, articulable reasons related to the immediate circumstances, not on a general desire to prevent recording. Question 3. Stakeholder feedback indicates a need to reinforce best practices in evidence collection during street-level encounters within the Chandler Police Department. An officer observes an individual exhibiting nervous behavior and making furtive movements near a known drug trafficking area. The officer approaches the individual to inquire about their presence. Based on the totality of the circumstances observed, what is the most appropriate course of action for the officer to take regarding a potential search of the individual or their belongings? Option A. Ask the individual if they have anything illegal on them, and if they deny it, assume they are being truthful and disengage. Option B. Document all observations and articulable facts supporting suspicion, and if probable cause exists, seek a warrant or obtain voluntary and informed consent for a search. Option C. Conduct an immediate pat-down search for weapons based on the furtive movements, regardless of whether there is a specific threat. Option D. Detain the individual for an extended period to gather more information without articulating specific grounds for the detention beyond initial suspicion. Correct answer is B. Document all observations and articulable facts supporting suspicion, and if probable cause exists, seek a warrant or obtain voluntary and informed consent for a search. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the legal and ethical obligations to protect individual rights and maintain the integrity of an investigation. Officers must act swiftly, but also deliberately, ensuring their actions are lawful and respect due process. The potential for misinterpretation of evidence or overreach in investigative tactics necessitates careful judgment. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously documenting all observations and evidence gathered during the initial encounter, including the basis for any suspicion, and then proceeding with a lawful search based on probable cause or consent. This approach respects the Fourth Amendment rights of individuals in Arizona by ensuring that searches are conducted only when legally permissible. It prioritizes obtaining a warrant if probable cause exists but is insufficient for an immediate search, or obtaining voluntary and informed consent. This aligns with established legal precedent and ethical policing standards that emphasize lawful evidence collection and the protection of civil liberties. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves conducting a search based solely on a hunch or a vague feeling of unease without articulable facts to support probable cause. This violates the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches and seizures, as it lacks the necessary legal justification. Such an action could lead to the suppression of any evidence found and disciplinary action against the officer. Another incorrect approach is to coerce or pressure an individual into consenting to a search. Consent must be voluntary and freely given, not the result of duress or intimidation. Obtaining consent under such circumstances renders it invalid, and any evidence discovered would be inadmissible in court. This also constitutes an ethical failure and a violation of an individual's rights. A third incorrect approach is to delay the investigation unnecessarily by failing to act on clear indicators of criminal activity when legally permissible to do so, thereby potentially allowing evidence to be destroyed or a suspect to escape. While caution is necessary, inaction when justified by probable cause or consent can also be detrimental to public safety and the investigative process. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and ethical conduct. This involves a continuous assessment of the situation, identifying articulable facts that support reasonable suspicion or probable cause, and understanding the nuances of consent. When in doubt about the legality of a search, consulting with a supervisor or legal counsel is a critical step. The goal is always to gather evidence lawfully and ethically, ensuring that the integrity of the investigation and the rights of all individuals are upheld. Question 4. Regulatory review indicates that a Chandler Police Department officer, during a lawful traffic stop in Arizona, discovers a small, unmarked baggie containing a white powdery substance in plain view on the passenger seat. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with Arizona's evidence handling laws and departmental policy? Option A. Seize the baggie and place it in the officer's personal vehicle for safekeeping until the end of the shift. Option B. Leave the baggie on the passenger seat, advising the driver not to touch it and continue with the traffic stop. Option C. Secure the baggie, meticulously document its discovery and location, initiate the chain of custody by logging the item, and transport it to the evidence locker for secure storage. Option D. Confiscate the baggie and dispose of it discreetly, believing it to be insignificant to the stop. The correct answer is C. Secure the baggie, meticulously document its discovery and location, initiate the chain of custody by logging the item, and transport it to the evidence locker for secure storage. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Chandler Police Department officer regarding the proper handling of evidence discovered during a lawful traffic stop. The officer must balance the need to secure potential evidence with the rights of the individual and the strict procedural requirements for evidence collection and preservation under Arizona law. Failure to adhere to these procedures can lead to the suppression of evidence, jeopardizing the prosecution of a case. Careful judgment is required to ensure all actions are legally sound and ethically defensible. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously documenting the discovery of the suspected contraband, securing it in a manner that preserves its integrity, and immediately initiating the chain of custody procedures as mandated by Arizona Revised Statutes, ARS. Section 13-3905 and Departmental Policy. This includes tagging the item, logging its discovery and transfer, and ensuring it is transported to the evidence locker or designated secure storage without delay. This approach ensures the evidence is admissible in court and upholds the integrity of the investigation. Incorrect approach is analysis. Seizing the item and placing it in the officer's personal vehicle without proper documentation or immediate transfer to secure evidence storage violates ARS. Section 13-3905 and Departmental Procedures for Evidence Handling. This creates a break in the chain of custody, making the evidence vulnerable to tampering or loss and potentially inadmissible. Leaving the suspected contraband at the scene without securing it, even if the driver is cooperative, is a dereliction of duty. It fails to preserve potential evidence that could be crucial to a criminal investigation, and violates the officer's responsibility to secure and collect evidence discovered during a lawful stop. Confiscating the item and disposing of it without following proper evidence collection protocols, even if the officer believes it is minor, is a serious ethical and legal violation. This constitutes destruction of potential evidence and undermines the principles of justice and accountability. Professional reasoning. Officers should always operate under the assumption that any item discovered during a lawful encounter could be critical evidence. The decision-making process should prioritize adherence to established legal procedures for evidence collection and preservation. This involves a thorough understanding of relevant Arizona statutes and departmental policies, meticulous documentation, and strict adherence to the chain of custody. When in doubt, officers should consult with supervisors or legal advisors to ensure proper procedure is followed. Question 5. Consider a scenario where Chandler Police Department officers are responding to a credible tip regarding the possession of illegal narcotics within a private residence. The tip suggests that the occupants may be aware of the police presence and could be attempting to destroy evidence. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officers to take to lawfully secure potential evidence? Option A. Immediately enter the residence and conduct a search to prevent the destruction of evidence, as the tip indicates a high probability of imminent destruction. Option B. Seek consent from the residents to search the property, or if consent is refused or not immediately obtainable, diligently pursue a search warrant based on the credible tip and the potential for evidence destruction. Option C. Delay the investigation for several hours to ensure all procedural steps are meticulously followed, even if it means the evidence might be lost. Option D. Enter the residence and conduct a search. Then inform a supervisor of the actions taken and request guidance on how to proceed with any evidence found. The correct answer is B. Seek consent from the residents to search the property, or if consent is refused or not immediately obtainable, diligently pursue a search warrant based on the credible tip and the potential for evidence destruction. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for rapid information gathering during an active investigation and the strict adherence to privacy rights and departmental policy. Officers must balance the urgency of securing evidence with the legal and ethical obligations to respect individual liberties. Missteps can lead to compromised investigations, legal challenges, and damage to public trust. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves obtaining consent from the individual whose property is being searched, or securing a warrant based on probable cause. This approach respects the individual's Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches and seizures, as guaranteed by the United States Constitution and codified in Arizona law. Obtaining consent or a warrant ensures that any evidence gathered is admissible in court and upholds the integrity of the investigation and the department's commitment to lawful procedure. Incorrect approach is analysis. Entering and searching the residence without consent or a warrant, even with the belief that evidence might be destroyed, constitutes a violation of the Fourth Amendment and Arizona revised statutes. This action is an unlawful search and seizure, which would render any evidence found inadmissible under the exclusionary rule. It also exposes the officers and the department to civil liability and disciplinary action. Delaying the investigation to obtain a warrant when there is a clear and present danger of evidence destruction, while seemingly prioritizing procedure, could also be professionally problematic if the delay results in the irretrievable loss of critical evidence. However, the primary failure here is not the delay itself, but the potential for subsequent actions taken without proper legal authorization if the delay is circumvented by an unlawful search. The correct approach is to diligently pursue the warrant process while taking reasonable steps to preserve the scene if possible, without violating constitutional rights. Contacting a supervisor for guidance, but proceeding with the search without explicit authorization or a warrant is a failure to follow established protocols and legal requirements. While seeking supervisory input is good practice, it does not negate the need for legal justification, consent, or warrant before conducting a search. This approach demonstrates a lack of independent judgment in applying legal principles and departmental policy. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes constitutional rights and departmental policy. This involves 1. Assessing the situation for exigent circumstances that might justify immediate action, but always with the understanding that such circumstances are narrowly defined. 2. If exigent circumstances are not clearly present or are debatable, the default action is to seek consent or a warrant. 3. If exigent circumstances are believed to exist, officers must be able to articulate specific facts supporting that belief to a supervisor or a court. 4. Always consult departmental policy and legal counsel when in doubt. The fundamental principle is that searches must be reasonable and conducted pursuant to legal authority. Question 6. Upon reviewing the Chandler Police Department's evidence processing procedures, what is the most effective strategy for optimizing workflow efficiency while ensuring strict adherence to Arizona's legal framework for evidence management? Option A. Prioritize the speed of evidence analysis by allowing officers to bypass certain preliminary verification steps before submitting items for forensic examination. Option B. Streamline the evidence transfer process by relying on verbal confirmations between officers and evidence custodians, thereby minimizing the need for written documentation. Option C. Expedite the release of evidence from storage facilities by implementing a faster disposal schedule, focusing primarily on reducing backlog without altering existing handling procedures. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive audit of current evidence processing steps to identify inefficiencies. Then implement standardized, technology-enhanced protocols that rigorously maintain chain of custody and comply with Arizona revised statutes. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive audit of current evidence processing steps to identify inefficiencies, then implement standardized, technology-enhanced protocols that rigorously maintain chain of custody and comply with Arizona revised statutes. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in law enforcement, balancing the need for efficient resource allocation with the imperative to uphold individual rights and due process. The Chandler Police Department, like all law enforcement agencies in Arizona, operates under specific state statutes and departmental policies that govern how evidence is collected, stored, and processed. The challenge lies in optimizing these processes without compromising the integrity of investigations or violating the constitutional rights of individuals involved. Careful judgment is required to ensure that efficiency measures do not inadvertently lead to procedural errors or the suppression of crucial evidence. The best approach involves a systematic review of existing evidence processing protocols to identify bottlenecks and areas for improvement, followed by the implementation of standardized, technology-assisted workflows that maintain strict chain of custody and compliance with Arizona revised statutes concerning evidence handling. This approach is correct because it directly addresses process optimization through a structured, compliant methodology. It prioritizes maintaining the integrity of evidence, which is paramount for successful prosecution and upholding due process under Arizona law. Furthermore, incorporating technology can enhance accuracy and reduce human error, aligning with best practices for evidence management. An approach that focuses solely on reducing the time evidence spends in storage without implementing concurrent improvements in tracking and retrieval mechanisms is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to lost or misplaced evidence, jeopardizing investigations and violating Arizona revised statutes regarding evidence accountability. Similarly, an approach that bypasses established verification steps in favor of speed, such as relying on verbal confirmations instead of documented sign-offs for evidence transfer, introduces significant risks of error and chain of custody breaches. This directly contravenes the meticulous record-keeping required by Arizona law and departmental policy to ensure evidence admissibility in court. Finally, an approach that prioritizes the speed of evidence disposal over thorough documentation and legal retention periods is also professionally unacceptable. This could result in the premature destruction of evidence that may be needed for future appeals or reopened investigations, violating legal mandates for evidence retention. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of current processes and their associated challenges. This should be followed by an assessment of potential solutions against established legal requirements and departmental policies. The chosen optimization strategy must demonstrably enhance efficiency while simultaneously reinforcing or maintaining compliance with all relevant Arizona statutes and ethical obligations concerning evidence handling and due process. Continuous evaluation and adaptation of the optimized processes are also crucial to ensure ongoing effectiveness and adherence to evolving legal standards. Question 7. When evaluating the most effective and legally sound method for gathering evidence in a potential felony case within Chandler, Arizona, which of the following strategies best upholds both investigative objectives and constitutional protections? Option A. Rely on anonymous tips and hearsay information to initiate a search and seizure, assuming that the information is likely accurate given the seriousness of the alleged crime. Option B. Interview potential witnesses under duress or without informing them of their rights, hoping to elicit confessions or incriminating statements that can be used to justify a later search. Option C. Secure a search warrant based on probable cause. Meticulously document all evidence collected according to departmental policy and Arizona revised statutes, and maintain a strict chain of custody. Option D. Conduct an immediate search of the premises based on a strong suspicion, believing that exigent circumstances might justify bypassing warrant requirements if evidence could be destroyed. Correct answer is C. Secure a search warrant based on probable cause. Meticulously document all evidence collected according to departmental policy and Arizona revised statutes, and maintain a strict chain of custody. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the legal and ethical obligations of the Chandler Police Department. Officers must act swiftly to investigate potential criminal activity, but their actions must always be within the bounds of Arizona law and departmental policy regarding privacy and evidence collection. The pressure to solve a case quickly can sometimes lead to shortcuts that compromise these fundamental principles. The best approach involves a systematic and legally sound method for gathering information. This includes obtaining necessary warrants based on probable cause, ensuring all evidence is collected and documented according to established protocols, and respecting the privacy rights of individuals. This approach is correct because it aligns with the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, and Arizona revised statutes that govern search warrants and evidence handling. Adhering to these legal frameworks ensures the integrity of the investigation and the admissibility of any evidence in court, while upholding public trust and individual rights. An approach that bypasses standard warrant procedures based on a hunch, even if the hunch is strong, is ethically and legally flawed. It violates the principle of probable cause required for a lawful search and seizure. This could lead to the suppression of evidence, jeopardizing the case and potentially exposing the department to civil liability. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on information obtained through potentially coercive or unethical means, such as pressuring a witness without proper legal safeguards. This not only risks obtaining unreliable information, but also violates ethical guidelines for interacting with individuals during an investigation and could lead to false accusations or wrongful arrests. Finally, an approach that prioritizes expediency over thoroughness, such as failing to properly document evidence collection, undermines the chain of custody and the reliability of the evidence. This can render the evidence inadmissible and weaken the prosecution's case, demonstrating a lack of professional diligence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and ethical conduct. This involves understanding the relevant laws and departmental policies, assessing the situation to determine the appropriate legal avenues for investigation, and consulting with supervisors or legal counsel when in doubt. The goal is to gather necessary information effectively while safeguarding constitutional rights and maintaining the integrity of the justice system. Question 8. The analysis reveals that the Chandler Police Department is experiencing an unexpected surge in community-requested programs requiring specialized equipment, exceeding the current year's allocated budget for such items. A senior officer, eager to support these initiatives, proposes immediately reallocating funds from a less critical operational reserve to cover the most urgent equipment needs, bypassing the standard requisition and approval process to expedite delivery. Considering the regulatory framework governing public funds in Arizona and the operational guidelines of the Chandler Police Department, which of the following approaches best optimizes the process for acquiring the necessary equipment while maintaining compliance and ethical standards? Option A. Immediately purchase the most urgently needed equipment using funds from the operational reserve, with the understanding that formal documentation and approval will be sought retroactively once the immediate need is met. Option B. Prioritize equipment requests based on which community programs have the most influential contacts within the City Council, and allocate funds accordingly to ensure political support for future budget requests. Option C. Delay the acquisition of all new equipment until the next fiscal year's budget cycle, even if it means postponing valuable community programs, to avoid any potential budgetary discrepancies. Option D. Initiate a formal review of the operational reserve's purpose and current necessity, and if deemed appropriate, submit a documented request for reallocation to the appropriate budgetary authority, clearly outlining the justification for the new equipment and its alignment with departmental priorities, while exploring all available grant opportunities. The correct answer is D. Initiate a formal review of the operational reserve's purpose and current necessity, and if deemed appropriate, submit a documented request for reallocation to the appropriate budgetary authority, clearly outlining the justification for the new equipment and its alignment with departmental priorities, while exploring all available grant opportunities. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario that is professionally challenging due to the inherent tension between the immediate need for resource allocation and the procedural requirements for fair and equitable distribution, particularly when dealing with limited public resources. The Chandler Police Department, like any municipal agency, operates under strict guidelines to ensure transparency, accountability, and adherence to the Arizona Revised Statutes concerning public funds and departmental operations. Careful judgment is required to balance operational efficiency with legal and ethical obligations. The best professional practice involves a systematic and documented approach to identifying and prioritizing needs based on objective criteria, ensuring all requests are evaluated against established departmental policies and budgetary constraints. This approach aligns with principles of good governance and fiscal responsibility mandated by Arizona law, which requires public funds to be expended for lawful purposes and in a manner that demonstrates prudent management. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit of accountability and efficiency expected of law enforcement agencies in Arizona. An approach that bypasses established procurement protocols for expediency, even with good intentions, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It undermines the integrity of the budgeting process and creates opportunities for favoritism or mismanagement of public funds, which is contrary to Arizona's public finance laws. Similarly, an approach that prioritizes requests based on personal relationships or informal influence, rather than objective departmental needs and strategic goals, violates ethical standards of impartiality and fairness expected of public servants. Such actions can lead to perceptions of impropriety and erode public trust. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of departmental objectives and available resources. This framework necessitates the development and consistent application of objective criteria for evaluating requests, followed by a transparent process for allocation that is documented and auditable. When faced with resource constraints, professionals must consult relevant departmental policies and Arizona statutes to ensure compliance and ethical conduct, prioritizing needs based on their impact on public safety and departmental effectiveness. Question 9. Cost-benefit analysis shows that the Chandler Police Department is considering adopting a new body-worn camera system. Which of the following approaches best represents a responsible and effective process for evaluating this significant expenditure? Option A. Conduct a thorough analysis of the system's impact on officer safety, evidence collection quality, and community relations, meticulously comparing its total life cycle costs, including acquisition, training, maintenance, and data storage, against projected operational benefits and potential reductions in liability. Option B. Focus primarily on the initial purchase price of the system, selecting the option that is the least expensive upfront, with the understanding that future costs can be addressed as they arise. Option C. Prioritize the acquisition of the system that offers the most advanced technological features and is currently being adopted by a majority of large metropolitan police departments across the United States. Option D. Proceed with the acquisition based on positive feedback from a few officers who have tested a prototype, assuming the benefits will be self-evident and widespread. Correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough analysis of the system's impact on officer safety, evidence collection quality, and community relations, meticulously comparing its total life cycle costs, including acquisition, training, maintenance, and data storage, against projected operational benefits and potential reductions in liability. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for resource allocation with the long-term implications of departmental efficiency and community trust. The Chandler Police Department, like any municipal law enforcement agency, operates under strict budgetary constraints and public accountability. Decisions regarding the acquisition of new equipment must not only be justifiable in terms of operational benefit, but also demonstrably cost-effective and aligned with departmental policies and ethical standards. The pressure to adopt new technology quickly can sometimes overshadow a thorough evaluation of its true value and potential drawbacks. The best approach involves a comprehensive evaluation that prioritizes demonstrable improvements in officer safety, operational effectiveness, and community service, weighed against the total cost of acquisition, training, maintenance, and potential obsolescence. This method ensures that resources are allocated to solutions that offer the greatest return on investment, not just in financial terms, but also in terms of enhanced public safety and departmental performance. This aligns with principles of responsible public administration and the ethical duty to be good stewards of taxpayer funds, as implicitly guided by Arizona revised statutes concerning public procurement and departmental operational standards. An approach that focuses solely on the perceived technological advancement without a rigorous cost-benefit analysis is professionally unacceptable. This overlooks the fundamental requirement for fiscal responsibility and can lead to the acquisition of expensive, underutilized, or even detrimental equipment. It fails to consider the opportunity cost, what other essential services or equipment might be foregone due to this expenditure. Furthermore, a lack of thorough evaluation can result in equipment that does not integrate well with existing systems or requires excessive, unplanned training, thereby negating initial perceived benefits. Another unacceptable approach is prioritizing the acquisition of equipment based on its popularity or adoption by other departments, without independent verification of its suitability and effectiveness for the specific needs and operational environment of the Chandler Police Department. This can lead to adopting solutions that are not a good fit, are prone to issues, or are simply more expensive than viable alternatives. It bypasses the critical step of assessing unique departmental requirements and operational context. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the enthusiastic endorsement of a single vendor or officer, without broader departmental input or objective data, is also professionally unsound. This introduces bias and lacks the systematic evaluation necessary for informed decision-making. It fails to engage the diverse expertise within the department and can lead to decisions driven by personal preference rather than objective needs and evidence. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that includes clearly defining the problem or need, identifying potential solutions, gathering objective data on costs and benefits for each solution, assessing risks and limitations, consulting relevant stakeholders, and making a decision based on a comprehensive, evidence-based evaluation. This process ensures accountability, transparency, and the optimal use of public resources. Question 10. Implementation of a new dispatch system in the Chandler Police Department has generated extensive data on officer response times across various call types. To assess the efficiency of patrol units, the department needs to establish a baseline metric for response times to burglary calls. Given the following data for the past month: call type, burglary, total number of burglary calls, 125, sum of all response times for burglary calls. 2. 125 minutes. What is the average response time per burglary call, and which calculation method best represents this metric for departmental performance evaluation? Option A. Sum all response times for burglary calls. 2. 125 minutes. Option B. Identify the mode response time from the raw data of individual response times. Option C. Calculate the median response time from the raw data of individual response times. Option D. Calculate the average response time by dividing the sum of all response times by the total number of calls. Frac 2125 text minutes 125 text calls Correct answer is D. Calculate the average response time by dividing the sum of all response times by the total number of calls. Backslash frac 2125 text minutes 125 text calls backslash. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient resource allocation with the long-term implications of data integrity and accurate performance metrics. Misinterpreting or misapplying data can lead to flawed strategic decisions, wasted resources, and ultimately, a failure to meet departmental objectives. The Chandler Police Department, like any public service agency, is accountable for its operational effectiveness and must rely on sound data to justify its resource deployment and demonstrate its impact. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a systematic approach to data analysis that accounts for all relevant variables and uses appropriate statistical methods. This includes calculating the average response time per call type, which provides a standardized metric for comparison and evaluation. The formula for average response time is the sum of all response times for a specific call type divided by the total number of calls of that type. For example, if the total response time for 10 burglary calls was 150 minutes, the average response time would be backslash frac 150 text minutes 10 text calls equals 15 text minutes slash call backslash. This method ensures that each call contributes equally to the average, providing a reliable benchmark for assessing efficiency and identifying areas for improvement. This aligns with principles of data-driven decision-making and operational accountability expected of law enforcement agencies. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to simply sum all response times without dividing by the number of calls. This would result in a total response time, not an average, and would be misleading as it does not account for the volume of incidents. For instance, summing response times for 100 calls would yield a much larger number than summing for 10 calls, making direct comparison impossible and leading to an inaccurate perception of performance. Another incorrect approach is to calculate the median response time without considering the distribution of all response times. While the median can be useful in identifying a central tendency, it can be skewed by outliers and does not reflect the overall operational tempo or the impact of very long or very short response times on the average. For example, a few extremely long response times could significantly inflate the average, while the median might remain unaffected, masking a real problem. A third incorrect approach is to calculate the mode response time. The mode represents the most frequent response time. While this can indicate a common occurrence, it does not provide a comprehensive understanding of the department's performance across all incidents. A department might have a common response time but still struggle with a significant number of calls that take much longer to respond to, which the mode would not capture. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach data analysis with a clear objective: to derive actionable insights that improve operational effectiveness and accountability. This involves understanding the strengths and limitations of different statistical measures. When evaluating performance metrics like response times, the average provides a robust measure of central tendency that is sensitive to all data points. Professionals should always consider the context of the data and the specific questions they are trying to answer. If outliers are a significant concern, further analysis of those specific incidents might be warranted, but the average remains a foundational metric for overall performance assessment. Question 11. To address the challenge of optimizing patrol deployment and response times within the Chandler Police Department, which of the following strategies represents the most effective and data-driven approach to enhance operational efficiency and public safety? Option A. Focus exclusively on reducing average response times to all calls for service, reassigning officers to prioritize immediate dispatch. Option B. Increase overall patrol hours across all districts by 15% to ensure a more visible police presence throughout the city. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of patrol deployment patterns, call data, and response metrics to identify inefficiencies and implement targeted adjustments to resource allocation and patrol strategies. Option D. Implement new patrol routes based on the subjective feedback of senior officers regarding perceived crime hotspots. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of patrol deployment patterns, call data, and response metrics to identify inefficiencies and implement targeted adjustments to resource allocation and patrol strategies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in law enforcement where resource allocation and operational efficiency must be balanced against the need for thorough investigation and community engagement. The Chandler Police Department, like any municipal agency, operates under budgetary constraints and public scrutiny, demanding that officers make judicious decisions about how to best utilize their time and expertise. The pressure to respond quickly to calls for service, while also addressing proactive crime prevention and community relations, creates a complex operational environment. Effective process optimization is crucial to ensure that departmental goals are met without compromising service quality or officer well-being. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a systematic review of current patrol deployment patterns and response times, identifying bottlenecks or inefficiencies, and then implementing data-driven adjustments to optimize resource allocation. This might include analyzing call volume by time of day and geographic area, assessing the effectiveness of different patrol strategies, e.g., zone saturation, directed patrols, and exploring technology solutions for improved dispatch and communication. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core principles of process optimization by using objective data to inform strategic decisions. It aligns with the general mandate of law enforcement agencies to provide efficient and effective public safety services, ensuring that resources are deployed where they are most needed and can have the greatest impact. This data-driven methodology fosters accountability and allows for continuous improvement, a hallmark of sound operational management. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to simply increase patrol hours across the board without any analysis of where or when those hours are most needed. This is inefficient, as it may lead to oversaturation in low-activity areas and continued understaffing in high-demand zones. It fails to optimize processes and represents a reactive, rather than strategic use of resources, potentially leading to increased overtime costs without a commensurate increase in public safety outcomes. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize only response times to calls for service, neglecting proactive policing strategies and community engagement. While rapid response is vital, an overemphasis on this single metric can lead to a reactive policing model that does not address the root causes of crime or build essential community trust. This approach fails to optimize the department's overall effectiveness by ignoring other critical functions that contribute to long-term public safety. A third incorrect approach would be to implement changes based solely on anecdotal evidence or the personal preferences of supervisors, without any supporting data. This can lead to arbitrary decisions that may not reflect actual operational needs or may even exacerbate existing inefficiencies. It lacks the objectivity required for effective process optimization and can undermine morale and trust within the department. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing this challenge should adopt a framework that prioritizes data collection and analysis. This involves defining clear objectives for process optimization, gathering relevant data, e.g., call data, crime statistics, response times, officer activity logs, analyzing this data to identify trends and inefficiencies, developing potential solutions based on the analysis, implementing pilot programs for new strategies, and continuously monitoring and evaluating the effectiveness of these changes. This iterative process ensures that decisions are informed, adaptable, and ultimately lead to improved operational efficiency and public service. Question 12. Examination of the data shows that Officer Miller, while on patrol in Chandler, Arizona, has recovered a firearm that is crucial evidence in an ongoing investigation. He needs to transfer this firearm to Detective Rodriguez for further analysis. What is the most appropriate procedure for Officer Miller to follow to ensure the integrity of the evidence and its admissibility in court? Option A. Leave the firearm on Detective Rodriguez's desk in his unlocked office, assuming he will retrieve it shortly. Option B. Allow a civilian evidence technician who happens to be in the vicinity to take possession of the firearm for safekeeping without formal documentation. Option C. Complete a detailed evidence transfer log, noting the time, date, location, and signatures of both Officer Miller and Detective Rodriguez, along with a description of the firearm. Option D. Verbally inform Detective Rodriguez that he is handing over the firearm and trust that the detective will handle it appropriately. The correct answer is C. Complete a detailed evidence transfer log, noting the time, date, location, and signatures of both Officer Miller and Detective Rodriguez, along with a description of the firearm. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the strict legal and ethical obligations regarding evidence handling and disclosure. The Chandler Police Department operates under Arizona state law and federal constitutional principles, particularly concerning the chain of custody and the integrity of evidence. A critical aspect of law enforcement is maintaining public trust, which is directly tied to the adherence to established procedures that ensure fairness and prevent tampering or contamination of evidence. The best approach involves meticulously documenting the transfer of the recovered firearm. This includes noting the exact time, date, location, the names and badge numbers of both the officer relinquishing and receiving the evidence, and a detailed description of the item. This process ensures the integrity of the chain of custody, a fundamental legal requirement in Arizona and under the U.S. Constitution. Proper documentation is crucial for the admissibility of evidence in court and protects against allegations of tampering or loss. Adhering to these established protocols, as mandated by departmental policy and state law, upholds the principles of due process and ensures that any subsequent legal proceedings are based on reliable and untainted evidence. An incorrect approach would be to verbally hand over the firearm to the detective without any written record. This failure to document the transfer directly violates the chain of custody requirements. Without a documented record, it becomes impossible to prove who had possession of the firearm at any given time, raising serious questions about its integrity and potentially rendering it inadmissible in court. This could lead to the dismissal of charges and damage the credibility of the investigation and the department. Another incorrect approach would be to leave the firearm unsecured in the detective's unlocked office for later processing. This creates an unacceptable risk of tampering, contamination, or accidental loss. The principle of evidence security is paramount to prevent any alteration or compromise of the item, which is a core ethical and legal responsibility of law enforcement officers in Arizona. Failure to secure evidence undermines the entire investigative process and can have severe legal repercussions. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to allow a civilian evidence technician to take possession without proper authorization and documentation. While civilian technicians play a vital role, their access to and handling of evidence must be strictly controlled and documented according to departmental policy and state regulations to maintain the integrity of the chain of custody. Unauthorized or undocumented transfer to a civilian could be seen as a breach of protocol, jeopardizing the evidence's legal standing. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established protocols and legal mandates. This involves a systematic approach. First, identify the relevant policies and legal requirements, e.g., chain of custody, evidence handling procedures. Second, assess the immediate situation and potential risks to evidence integrity. Third, select the action that best aligns with these protocols and mitigates risks. Finally, meticulously document all actions taken. This structured approach ensures that decisions are not only practical but also legally sound and ethically defensible. Question 13. Research into the Chandler Police Department's operational efficiency has revealed a need to optimize its evidence handling processes. Considering the legal and ethical obligations in Arizona, which of the following strategies would best ensure the integrity and accountability of evidence from collection to disposition? Option A. Expedite the initial logging of evidence by prioritizing speed over the verification of digital entries against physical items, assuming officers will recall details later if needed. Option B. Implement a comprehensive system for logging and tracking evidence that includes mandatory dual sign-offs for all chain of custody transfers, regular audits of evidence storage, and cross-referencing of physical evidence with digital records. Option C. Schedule comprehensive audits of evidence storage facilities only once every 2 years to minimize disruption to daily operations. Option D. Eliminate formal documentation for chain of custody transfers, relying instead on the verbal confirmation and memory of the officers involved. Correct answer is B. Implement a comprehensive system for logging and tracking evidence that includes mandatory dual sign-offs for all chain of custody transfers, regular audits of evidence storage, and cross-referencing of physical evidence with digital records. Explanation. Research into the Chandler Police Department's operational efficiency has highlighted the critical need for process optimization within its evidence handling procedures. This scenario is professionally challenging because mishandling evidence can lead to compromised investigations, wrongful convictions, or acquittals, directly impacting public trust and the integrity of the justice system in Arizona. Adherence to strict protocols is paramount, as any deviation can have severe legal and ethical repercussions. The best approach involves a systematic review and refinement of the existing evidence logging and tracking system. This entails identifying bottlenecks, potential points of error, and areas where technology can enhance accuracy and security. Specifically, this would involve cross-referencing physical evidence logs with digital records, implementing mandatory dual sign-offs for chain of custody transfers, and establishing a clear protocol for regular audits of the evidence storage facility. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core principles of evidence integrity and chain of custody, which are foundational to criminal proceedings in Arizona. The Arizona Revised Statutes, particularly those concerning criminal procedure and evidence, mandate meticulous handling to ensure admissibility in court. Ethical guidelines for law enforcement officers in Arizona also emphasize the duty to preserve evidence in its original state and maintain an unbroken chain of custody, an approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy in logging new evidence. By skipping the verification step of cross-referencing physical items with their digital entries, is professionally unacceptable. This failure directly violates the principle of maintaining an accurate record of evidence, increasing the risk of discrepancies that could be exploited by defense counsel. It also bypasses a critical control point designed to prevent errors, potentially leading to evidence being misidentified or lost. Another professionally unacceptable approach would be to rely solely on the memory of officers for chain of custody transfers, without a formal, documented system. This is ethically unsound as it introduces a high degree of subjectivity and unreliability. Arizona law requires documented proof of custody transfers to establish the integrity of the evidence. Relying on memory creates a significant vulnerability that can undermine the prosecution's case. Finally, an approach that delays the auditing of evidence storage for extended periods, such as annually, is also problematic. While audits are important, infrequent audits increase the risk of undetected tampering, loss, or degradation of evidence. Best practices, often implicitly supported by legal standards for evidence preservation, suggest more frequent checks to ensure ongoing security and accountability. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the legal and ethical mandates governing evidence handling in Arizona. This involves prioritizing accuracy, security, and accountability at every step. When considering process changes, the primary question should be, does this change enhance or detract from the integrity and traceability of the evidence, and does it comply with Arizona Revised Statutes and law enforcement ethical codes? Question 14. Which approach would be most appropriate for a Chandler Police Department officer responding to a domestic disturbance call where a firearm is reported to be present and accessible to one of the individuals involved? Option A. Conduct an aggressive interrogation of the individual believed to possess the firearm to force its surrender, without regard for Miranda warnings. Option B. Secure the scene, de-escalate the situation. Conduct thorough interviews to establish probable cause for firearm seizure under Arizona law, and seize the firearm if probable cause is met, documenting all actions. Option C. Focus solely on verbal de-escalation and mediating the dispute, disregarding the report of a firearm to avoid escalating tensions. Option D. Immediately confiscate the firearm upon arrival, regardless of whether probable cause has been established, to ensure immediate safety. The correct answer is B. Secure the scene, de-escalate the situation, conduct thorough interviews to establish probable cause for firearm seizure under Arizona law, and seize the firearm if probable cause is met, documenting all actions. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for a Chandler Police Department officer responding to a domestic disturbance where a firearm is reportedly present. The core professional challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for public safety, the rights of individuals involved, and adherence to departmental policies and Arizona state laws regarding firearms and domestic violence. The officer must make rapid, critical decisions under pressure, potentially involving the seizure of a weapon, while ensuring due process and avoiding unnecessary escalation. The best approach involves a systematic, policy-driven response that prioritizes de-escalation and evidence gathering, while respecting constitutional rights. This approach begins with securing the scene and ensuring the safety of all individuals present, including the reporting party and any potential aggressors. It then involves a thorough, non-confrontational interview process to ascertain the facts, identify the firearm's location and ownership, and determine if probable cause exists for its seizure under Arizona Revised Statutes, Rs. Section 13-3602, which addresses domestic violence and firearm restrictions. If probable cause is established, the officer would then proceed with the lawful seizure of the firearm, documenting all actions meticulously. This method aligns with the Chandler Police Department's Standard Operating Procedures, SOP, for domestic violence calls and ARS Section 13-3602, which mandates the seizure of firearms when probable cause exists that a domestic violence incident has occurred and the firearm is accessible to the respondent. This approach ensures legal compliance, officer safety, and the protection of victims, an approach that immediately confiscates the firearm without establishing probable cause or conducting a thorough investigation would be a regulatory and ethical failure. This would violate the Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches and seizures and potentially lead to civil liability for the department and the officer. It bypasses the legal requirement to demonstrate probable cause, which is a cornerstone of lawful firearm seizure in domestic violence situations under ARS Section 13-3602. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the report of a firearm altogether and only focus on verbal de-escalation, especially if there is credible information suggesting the firearm is present and poses a risk. This failure to address a known potential threat would be a dereliction of duty, violating departmental policies on officer safety and response to violent crime, and could have catastrophic consequences for victim safety and public security. Finally, an approach that involves aggressive interrogation and intimidation tactics to force a confession or voluntary surrender of the firearm, without adhering to proper interview protocols and Miranda warnings if applicable, would be both a regulatory and ethical violation. This could compromise the integrity of any evidence obtained and lead to the exclusion of statements in court, undermining the pursuit of justice. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and legal statutes, emphasizes de-escalation and information gathering, and maintains a commitment to constitutional rights. This involves a continuous assessment of the situation, a clear understanding of legal parameters, and a focus on objective evidence rather than assumptions or emotional responses. Question 15. The efficiency study reveals a significant backlog in processing permit applications at the Chandler Police Department, impacting timely service to the community. Considering the requirements of Arizona Revised Statutes concerning public safety and licensing, which of the following approaches would best optimize the permit application process while ensuring regulatory compliance? Option A. Implement a tiered review system that categorizes applications based on complexity and potential risk, allowing for expedited processing of simpler applications and thorough review of more complex ones. Option B. Continue with the current application processing procedures without making any changes, as the backlog is a temporary issue. Option C. Expedite the processing of all permit applications immediately, regardless of their nature or potential impact on public safety, to clear the backlog as quickly as possible. Option D. Outsource all permit application reviews to an external vendor, without establishing a robust internal oversight mechanism to ensure adherence to Arizona Revised Statutes. The correct answer is A. Implement a tiered review system that categorizes applications based on complexity and potential risk, allowing for expedited processing of simpler applications and thorough review of more complex ones. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a significant backlog in processing permit applications at the Chandler Police Department. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts public service delivery, potentially hindering legitimate business activities and community development. Balancing the need for speed with the imperative of thorough due diligence and adherence to Arizona Revised Statutes, Rs, concerning public safety and licensing is paramount. Failure to do so can lead to regulatory noncompliance, public distrust, and potential legal challenges. The best approach involves implementing a tiered review system for permit applications. The system prioritizes applications based on complexity and potential risk, ensuring that straightforward applications are processed quickly, while more complex ones receive the necessary in-depth scrutiny. This method is correct because it aligns with the principles of administrative efficiency and due process mandated by ARS. By categorizing applications, the department can allocate resources more effectively, reducing overall processing times without compromising the integrity of the review process. This proactive management of workflow ensures compliance with ARS requirements for timely and fair processing of all applications, thereby upholding public trust and departmental integrity. An approach that involves expediting all applications without regard to their complexity or potential impact on public safety is professionally unacceptable. This would violate the spirit and letter of ARS, which requires a thorough review to ensure public safety and compliance with licensing regulations. Such a shortcut could lead to the issuance of permits to unqualified individuals or for activities that pose a risk to the community, directly contravening the department's mandate. Another unacceptable approach is to maintain the current system without any modifications, despite the identified backlog. This demonstrates a lack of responsiveness to operational inefficiencies and a failure to adapt to changing demands, which can erode public confidence and potentially lead to a violation of statutory obligations for timely service. Finally, an approach that involves outsourcing the entire permit review process to an external agency without adequate oversight or established quality control mechanisms is also professionally unsound. While outsourcing can sometimes improve efficiency, it risks compromising the specific knowledge of local ordinances and ARS requirements held by departmental staff. Without stringent oversight, the department could lose control over the quality and compliance of the reviews, potentially leading to errors and non-compliance with Arizona law. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the problem and its impact. This involves analyzing current workflows, identifying bottlenecks, and consulting relevant statutes and departmental policies. The next step is to brainstorm potential solutions, evaluating each against regulatory requirements, ethical considerations, and operational feasibility. Pilot testing promising solutions and gathering feedback are crucial before full implementation. Continuous monitoring and adaptation are essential to ensure ongoing efficiency and compliance. Question 16. Operational review demonstrates that the Chandler Police Department's patrol deployment strategy may not be optimally aligned with current crime trends and community needs. Considering the department's commitment to efficient resource utilization and effective public safety for all Chandler residents, which of the following approaches would best address these findings? Option A. Increase general patrol hours uniformly across all districts of Chandler without specific data analysis, assuming a broader presence will deter crime everywhere. Option B. Reduce patrol presence in neighborhoods with historically lower reported crime rates to reallocate officers to administrative support functions, believing these areas require less immediate attention. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of crime data, call for service records, and community feedback to identify specific high-need areas and times, and then reallocate patrol resources and adjust patrol routes accordingly to maximize coverage and implement targeted proactive initiatives. Option D. Focus solely on increasing visible enforcement activities, such as traffic stops and minor ordinance enforcement, in areas perceived to have lower crime rates to maintain a general sense of order. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of crime data, call for service records, and community feedback to identify specific high-need areas and times, and then reallocate patrol resources and adjust patrol routes accordingly to maximize coverage and implement targeted proactive initiatives. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in law enforcement where resource allocation must be optimized to address competing demands. The Chandler Police Department, like any municipal agency, operates under strict budgetary constraints and public accountability. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for visible patrol presence with the long-term benefits of proactive crime prevention strategies, all while adhering to departmental policies and ethical considerations regarding fair and effective service delivery to all residents of Chandler, Arizona. Correct approach analysis. The most effective approach involves a data-driven assessment of crime patterns and community needs to strategically deploy resources. This means analyzing crime statistics, call for service data, and community feedback to identify high-risk areas and times. Based on this analysis, patrol routes and staffing levels can be adjusted to maximize coverage in areas with the greatest need, and to implement targeted proactive policing initiatives. This approach is correct because it aligns with principles of efficient resource management, evidence-based policing, and the ethical obligation to serve the entire community equitably. It directly addresses the operational review's findings by seeking to improve effectiveness and efficiency through informed decision-making, consistent with best practices in public safety administration in Arizona. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to simply increase general patrol hours across the entire city without specific data to guide the deployment. This is inefficient as it spreads resources thinly and may not address the actual hotspots of crime or community concern. It fails to optimize processes and could lead to wasted resources, potentially violating principles of fiscal responsibility and effective service delivery. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize only highly visible, reactive policing methods, such as increased traffic enforcement in low-crime areas, while neglecting proactive strategies like community engagement or intelligence-led policing. This fails to address the root causes of crime and may not be the most effective use of limited resources for overall public safety in Chandler. It also risks alienating segments of the community if enforcement appears arbitrary or disproportionate. A third incorrect approach would be to reduce patrol presence in certain neighborhoods based on assumptions rather than data, perhaps due to perceived lower crime rates or a desire to reallocate officers to administrative tasks. This can lead to a decline in public safety in those areas, erode community trust, and create a perception of unequal service, which is ethically problematic and contrary to the department's duty to protect all citizens of Chandler. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process that begins with a thorough understanding of the problem or operational finding. This involves gathering relevant data, consulting departmental policies and procedures, and considering ethical implications. When faced with resource allocation challenges, the process should prioritize evidence-based strategies that demonstrate a clear link to improved public safety outcomes and efficient use of taxpayer funds. Continuous evaluation and adaptation of strategies based on performance metrics are also crucial for ongoing process optimization. Question 17. System analysis indicates that the Chandler Police Department is experiencing significant delays in responding to non-emergency public inquiries due to sworn officers being disproportionately tasked with managing these requests. Considering the principles of process optimization and efficient resource allocation within the Chandler Police Department's operational framework, which of the following strategies would best address this challenge? Option A. Continue to have all uniformed officers field all incoming non-emergency calls and emails as they arise, relying on their discretion to manage the workload. Option B. Randomly assign different uniformed officers each week to manage all non-emergency inquiries, without specific training or standardized procedures. Option C. Establish a basic voicemail system for all non-emergency inquiries, with messages to be checked and responded to at the end of each shift. Option D. Implement a centralized, multi-channel intake system for non-emergency inquiries, utilizing trained civilian personnel or specialized administrative officers to categorize, prioritize, and route requests via a dedicated online portal and non-emergency phone line. The correct answer is D. Implement a centralized, multi-channel intake system for non-emergency inquiries, utilizing trained civilian personnel or specialized administrative officers to categorize, prioritize, and route requests via a dedicated online portal and non-emergency phone line. Explanation. System analysis indicates that the Chandler Police Department faces a recurring challenge in optimizing its response to non-emergency public inquiries, leading to increased officer time spent on administrative tasks rather than core policing duties. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts resource allocation, officer efficiency, and public perception of police responsiveness. A failure to effectively manage these inquiries can strain departmental resources, potentially delaying responses to critical incidents and fostering public dissatisfaction. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for thoroughness with the imperative of efficient service delivery. The best approach involves establishing a dedicated, multi-channel intake system for non-emergency inquiries, staffed by trained civilian personnel or specialized administrative officers. This system should leverage technology, such as a centralized online portal and a dedicated non-emergency phone line, to categorize, prioritize, and route inquiries to the appropriate department or officer. This method is correct because it directly addresses the root cause of inefficiency by creating a specialized, streamlined process. It aligns with principles of process optimization by segmenting tasks, improving workflow, and freeing up sworn officers for duties that require their unique authority and training. This also enhances public service by providing clear, accessible channels for non-emergency issues, leading to more consistent and timely resolution. An approach that relies solely on uniformed officers to field all incoming non-emergency calls and emails is professionally unacceptable. This method fails to optimize processes by overloading sworn officers with tasks that do not require their sworn authority, diverting them from patrol, investigation, and community engagement. It is inefficient and can lead to delays in addressing both emergency and non-emergency matters. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to implement a basic voicemail system for all non-emergency inquiries, without any system for categorization or follow-up. This creates a black hole for information, leading to frustration for the public and a lack of accountability within the department. It demonstrates a failure to optimize processes and a disregard for effective communication and service delivery. Finally, an approach that involves sporadically assigning different officers to manage non-emergency inquiries on a rotating basis without standardized procedures or training is also professionally unsound. This leads to inconsistency in response, a lack of institutional knowledge, and an inefficient use of officer time as each officer must relearn the process. It fails to optimize the workflow and undermines the goal of consistent, efficient public service. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core problem, inefficient handling of non-emergency inquiries. This should be followed by an analysis of potential solutions, evaluating each against criteria such as efficiency, effectiveness, resource utilization, and public service impact. The chosen solution should then be implemented with clear protocols, training, and ongoing evaluation to ensure continuous improvement. Question 18. The efficiency study reveals a significant backlog in processing permit applications at the Chandler Police Department. To address this, which of the following strategies would best optimize the permit application process while ensuring compliance with Arizona revised statutes and Chandler City ordinances? Option A. Hire additional staff to handle the increased workload without analyzing or modifying the existing application processing procedures. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the entire permit application workflow, identify specific bottlenecks, and implement targeted process improvements, potentially including technological enhancements and interdepartmental coordination, while ensuring all steps align with legal requirements. Option C. Implement a policy to bypass certain mandatory verification steps for applications deemed low risk to speed up approvals. Option D. Immediately reduce the standard review time for all permit types by 20% to expedite processing, regardless of the complexity or specific requirements of each application. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the entire permit application workflow, identify specific bottlenecks, and implement targeted process improvements, potentially including technological enhancements and interdepartmental coordination, while ensuring all steps align with legal requirements. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a significant backlog in processing permit applications at the Chandler Police Department. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts public safety, economic development, and the department's reputation. Balancing the need for thorough review with the imperative to provide timely service requires careful judgment and adherence to established procedures and ethical considerations. The best approach involves a systematic review of the current permit application process to identify bottlenecks and implement targeted improvements. This includes analyzing each stage of the application lifecycle, from submission to final approval, to pinpoint inefficiencies. The department should then consult relevant Arizona revised statutes, (ARS), and Chandler City ordinances pertaining to permit processing timelines and requirements. For example, ARS Section 9-467, 05 outlines general municipal planning and zoning powers, which indirectly influence permit processing. Chandler City Code, Chapter 15, specifically addresses various permits and their associated review processes. Implementing process optimization techniques, such as streamlining documentation requirements where legally permissible, enhancing interdepartmental communication for faster reviews, and investing in technology to automate certain tasks, aligns with the principles of good governance and efficient public service. This approach prioritizes both compliance with legal mandates and the effective delivery of services to the community, ensuring that applications are processed accurately and without undue delay, thereby upholding public trust and departmental integrity. An incorrect approach would be to arbitrarily reduce review times without a corresponding analysis of the legal and safety implications. This could lead to overlooking critical compliance issues, potentially resulting in the issuance of permits for activities that pose a risk to public safety or violate zoning ordinances. Such an action would contravene the spirit and letter of ARS and Chandler City Code, which mandate thorough review to protect community interests. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed over accuracy by implementing shortcuts that bypass essential verification steps. This might involve approving applications based on incomplete information or without proper consultation with relevant stakeholders, as required by specific ordinances. This not only risks non-compliance with legal requirements, but also undermines the department's credibility and could lead to legal challenges or public outcry. A further incorrect approach would be to focus solely on increasing staff numbers without addressing underlying process inefficiencies. While additional personnel might offer some relief, without optimizing the workflow, the department risks simply adding more people to an inefficient system, leading to continued delays and increased operational costs without achieving true efficiency. This fails to address the root causes of the backlog and is not a sustainable solution. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the problem, followed by an assessment of available resources and constraints. This involves consulting relevant legal frameworks, ARS and Chandler City Code, identifying best practices in process management, and engaging stakeholders. A data-driven approach to identifying bottlenecks, coupled with a commitment to continuous improvement and adherence to ethical principles of fairness and public service, will lead to effective and sustainable solutions. Question 19. The performance metrics show a consistent increase in response times for non-emergency calls within the Chandler Police Department over the past quarter. Considering the need for efficient resource allocation and maintaining public trust, which of the following strategies would best address this trend? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of dispatch protocols and patrol officer deployment for non-emergency calls, analyzing call volume, staffing patterns, and existing technology to identify and rectify process inefficiencies. Option B. Immediately hire additional dispatchers and patrol officers to be deployed across all shifts, assuming increased staffing will inherently reduce response times. Option C. Introduce a new, advanced dispatch software system without pilot testing or comprehensive training for personnel, expecting it to automatically resolve the response time issues. Option D. Implement a strict policy prioritizing all emergency calls, allowing for significant delays in non-emergency call responses without further investigation into the causes of the delays. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough review of dispatch protocols and patrol officer deployment for non-emergency calls, analyzing call volume, staffing patterns, and existing technology to identify and rectify process inefficiencies. Explanation. The performance metrics show a consistent increase in response times for non-emergency calls within the Chandler Police Department over the past quarter. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts public trust and the efficient allocation of departmental resources. Officers and dispatchers are expected to manage their workload effectively, and delays in addressing non-emergency issues can lead to citizen frustration and potentially escalate minor problems. Careful judgment is required to identify the root cause of the delays and implement sustainable solutions without compromising the department's primary mission of public safety. The best approach involves a comprehensive review of current dispatch and patrol allocation protocol for non-emergency calls. This includes analyzing call volume trends, assessing staffing levels during peak and off-peak hours, and evaluating the efficiency of existing communication and dispatch software. By identifying bottlenecks in the current process, such as inefficient call routing or understaffing during specific shifts. The department can develop targeted strategies for improvement. This aligns with the principles of effective public administration and resource management, aiming to optimize service delivery within the established operational framework of the Chandler Police Department. The Arizona revised statutes, particularly those pertaining to law enforcement agency operations and public service standards, implicitly support such proactive performance analysis and process improvement to ensure efficient and effective policing. An incorrect approach would be to simply increase staffing across all shifts without a data-driven analysis of where the increased personnel are most needed. This could lead to inefficient use of taxpayer funds and may not address the specific causes of the increased response times. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize emergency call to such an extent that non-emergency calls are consistently delayed beyond acceptable service levels, without a clear policy or justification for such prioritization. This could erode public confidence and lead to complaints about the department's responsiveness to all community needs. Furthermore, implementing a new, unproven technology solution without adequate testing or training for dispatchers and officers would be a flawed strategy, potentially introducing new inefficiencies and errors. Professionals should employ a data-driven decision-making process. This involves 1. Clearly defining the problem and its impact. 2. Gathering and analyzing relevant data to understand the root causes. 3. Developing a range of potential solutions. 4. Evaluating each solution against established criteria, including cost-effectiveness, feasibility, and alignment with departmental goals and regulations. 5. Implementing the chosen solution with clear communication and adequate training. 6. Continuously monitoring the results and making adjustments as necessary. Question 20. The efficiency study reveals that the Chandler Police Department's response times to Priority 1 calls have been exceeding the departmental target of 5 minutes. To optimize resource allocation and improve response times, the department has gathered data from the last quarter. During this period, there were 12,000 total calls for service, with 20% classified as Priority 1. The average response time for Priority 1 calls was 7 minutes and 30 seconds. The department currently operates with 10 patrol units on duty during peak hours. If the department aims to achieve an average response time of 5 minutes or less for Priority 1 calls, and assuming call volume and officer availability remain constant, what is the minimum number of additional patrol units required during peak hours to meet this target? Given that each unit can effectively handle an average of 15 Priority 1 calls per peak hour. Option A. Increase the total number of patrol units by 10% and reevaluate response times. Option B. Calculate the current number of Priority 1 calls per peak hour, determine the number of units needed to handle these calls within the target response time, and find the difference between the required units and the current units. Option C. Reduce the average response time for non-priority calls by 1 minute to free up resources. Option D. Focus on improving the efficiency of dispatch by reducing call processing time by 30 seconds. The correct answer is B. Calculate the current number of Priority 1 calls per peak hour, determine the number of units needed to handle these calls within the target response time, and find the difference between the required units and the current units. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a critical need to optimize resource allocation within the Chandler Police Department, specifically concerning response times to priority calls. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the imperative of rapid response to serious incidents with the efficient deployment of limited personnel and resources. Miscalculations or flawed methodologies can lead to either delayed responses to emergencies or wasted resources on non-critical tasks, both of which have significant public safety and departmental integrity implications. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any proposed solution is not only mathematically sound, but also operationally feasible and compliant with departmental policies and Arizona state law regarding public safety response standards. The approach that represents best professional practice involves calculating the average response time for Priority 1 calls over the last quarter and projecting the required number of patrol units needed to achieve a target response time of 5 minutes or less, based on the current call volume distribution. This is correct because it directly addresses the core objective of improving response to the most critical incidents by using historical data to inform future resource needs. It aligns with the fundamental ethical and legal obligation of law enforcement agencies to prioritize and effectively respond to emergencies, as mandated by public trust and departmental directives aimed at ensuring public safety. This data-driven, target-oriented approach ensures that resources are allocated to meet the most pressing needs, thereby optimizing efficiency in a manner that directly enhances public safety outcomes. An incorrect approach would be to simply increase the total number of patrol units by 10% without analyzing specific call types or response times. This fails to address the root cause of any potential inefficiencies and may lead to overstaffing on less critical shifts or in areas with lower call volumes, thus misallocating resources and failing to specifically target the improvement of priority 1 response times. It is ethically and regulatorily unsound, as it does not demonstrate a commitment to optimizing resources for the most critical public safety needs. Another incorrect approach would be to reduce the minimum staffing levels on all shifts to free up officers for potential overtime deployment to high-call areas. This is professionally unacceptable because it directly compromises the ability to respond to any calls, including priority ones, by reducing the baseline availability of officers. It violates the principle of maintaining adequate staffing for immediate response and could lead to significant delays in all types of calls, not just priority ones, thereby failing to meet the department's core duty of public safety. A further incorrect approach would be to focus solely on reducing response times for non-priority calls to improve overall departmental efficiency metrics. While efficiency is important, prioritizing non-critical calls over priority ones is a direct contravention of public safety mandates and ethical policing. This approach would likely lead to longer response times for serious incidents, which is a critical failure in fulfilling the department's primary responsibility. The professional reasoning framework for decision-making in such situations should involve a multi-step process. First, clearly define the problem and the desired outcome, e.g., reducing priority 1 response times. Second, gather relevant data, e.g., historical call data, response times, staffing levels. Third, develop and analyze potential solutions using appropriate mathematical and statistical methods, ensuring they are aligned with departmental goals and regulatory requirements. Fourth, evaluate the feasibility and impact of each solution, considering operational constraints and ethical implications. Finally, implement the chosen solution, monitor its effectiveness, and be prepared to make adjustments as needed. This systematic, data-driven, and ethically grounded approach ensures that decisions are informed, effective, and uphold the department's commitment to public safety.